Can you believe you made such a big deal out of this?
I can't believe how bad it was last week.
And how good it is this week?
This week.
So what's this dude up to?
Not much, like I told you, he's not bad. Like,
Doing good?
That's why, like, when we had to reschedule, I wasn't too stressed about it.
Yeah.
It's been pretty well. The only times that, like, he's, like, shows signs of, like, you know, like, any, quote-unquote, like, negative stuff.
Yeah.
It's with the other dogs, which is, like you said, expected, because
Yeah.
we don't really, like, put the collar on him as much. We kind of do vocal commands, which, when corrected, he corrects himself. So,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's been cool. Me and him have expanded in the mornings. Like, we do some, like, of the stays with the leash on, and
Yep.
we've been doing some without. And, you know, just practice both opening doors,
Yep.
stuff like that.
Now, when you say, you know, if there is any negativity, it's with the other dogs, like what sort of stuff have you seen?
It's not even negative to me, but that's when he'll, like, you know what I'm saying, be a little rambunctious or, like, kind of play with them.
I gotcha.
I don't know if it's, like, just his voice or if it's, like, aggression, but, like, he
Yeah.
has this, like, it sounds aggressive. Like, he has, like, a voice that he makes, like, when they're, like, being let out of their cages.
Yeah.
He'll run around and be, like, all of a sudden this real deep, like, barking.
I gotcha.
I don't know what he's doing, but I don't know if it's aggression or not, but he doesn't do anything, but he kind of, like, goes rough with the other dog
Sure.
and runs off, and then, you know.
Yeah, you would likely know if it was, you know, some sort of aggressive anything. Yeah, you would likely know if it was a problem. A lot of times, especially with the shepherds and stuff like that, they're just loud, noisy dogs, and especially with like stimulation, kind of that herding instinct can come out of them. And I even saw this with my guys for a while, where like if there's a big spike of energy, they want to like run over and just like jump on it, you know, and not like attack it or anything like that, but it's like they're kind of trying to control that energy, you know. So if I start noticing it becomes like really problematic, like let's say you see it continue over the course of the next month to escalate a little bit, escalate a little bit, escalate a little bit, and it's happening consistently when you let him out of the crate, right? I would start popping his e-collar on him, and then when you do go to let him out of the crate, the second he goes to reherse that behavior, just give a correction for it.
So that, okay.
So it teaches them like a cutoff for it. So instead of...
So when we let them out their rooms to go outside, we do let it go as like a free run, like kind of just to the door, we let him out and then go.
That's fine.
That's when he does it. Should we not, like him specifically, should we regress him to like kind of be like controlled as he runs out?
Not necessarily. So with my dogs, I do that. Like when I get home, it's open the crate doors, let them go run into the back door, you know, and then I go let them out the back door to go into the yard. If I start noticing like that, again, he's getting too amped up, or if one of my dogs is getting too overstimulated by something like that, I'm not necessarily going to stop and make them like walk slowly with me or anything like that. I'm just going to address whatever the specific problem is, right? So it's not that he's getting aroused and excited that the issue is. The problem is when he gets aroused and excited that he's going and getting really vocal and like jumping at the other dogs. You know what I mean? So
when he does that, say no.
I would just give a correction just for that. No different than if you were jumping or counter surfing or anything like that. Still not her.
She said I'm 5 away.
Oh, that's okay.
2 minutes ago.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, you could start giving a correction specifically for that behavior, and that will teach him to just bring it down a couple of notches on his own, you know? And, you know, it's not wrong to, like, if you want to practice, like, once every now and then, making him do, like, come and stay with you as he comes out of the crate all the way to the back door. You know, it's a good training opportunity to make sure that you can do it, but you don't have to do that every single time when you go to let him out by any means.
Yeah, I'd say, besides that, like, I don't really see that as, like, a...
No, I mean, that's...
Well, like, so I said, like...
Yeah, I understand.
I guess, like...
Sure. Yeah, he's just getting a little overstimulated.
One thing that, I guess, I just remembered, sometimes, like, when we're doing the downstays,
Yep.
He'll, like, if he does it incorrect and you go to correct him, he'll run to the door.
Okay.
Like we do it in the backyard.
Yep.
He'll run to the door and try to do it down there, and, like, I correct him back over, but, I don't know, he just kind of runs off instead of, like, comes right back.
Yep. So keep in mind that when we give our correction, we have to reset the dog after we give that correction. So let's take that example. Let's say this is the backyard and this is the back door to the house, and I'm working a downstay right here, and he gets up, right, and I tell him no and correct him, and then he goes and runs to the door. I wouldn't actually correct again there at that point. I would just get him back over, use a come command or something, resituate him back into a down, and then over time, as he starts realizing after he gets that correction, regardless of where he goes, we're gonna take him all the way back here. You're going to notice he's not going to wander as far, and he'll stay a little closer to you then at that point.
Does that kind of like build like an association with like how he guesses stuff, or just
yeah, I mean,
because he thinks he's coming back?
Yeah, I mean, the correction for whatever reason in his mind in the backyard means go into the house, you know? And that could be for whatever reason. That could be because we do a lot of come commands from the backyard into the house, and he gets corrected for that. It could be anything, you know?
I do the downstays at like right in front of the sliding door because the other dogs would be there.
Sure.
So I feel like it's like a super high like stress, and he does well with that.
Yep.
So I don't know if maybe that's like why he goes back there. That's like
it's possible. If you work on a lot of them there, yeah, I mean, that could be kind of a default, no different than some dogs. Like if I correct a dog up here and they're doing it down over there, sometimes they'll go and run to the bed because we do a lot of bed stays, and they see this as like, that's where I need to go to, you know?
And he does good with beds now, like not confusing him. We like kind of structured and move some furniture around, clean some places up, and like he's got like specific beds now. Like there's a bed at the end of our bed on the ground, a bed in my office next to my like station, and then like a bed in the living room. And
cool.
He does really well, like, and then if you say no or you correct anything, like he tends to just kind of run to his bed and just
yeah, like I said, they're gonna have those defaults from time to time, you know. I try to, you know, as I'm working commands and stuff, I have certain locations that I practice certain commands, right? Like in my living room, for example, I'm primarily working bed stays in there, you know? So if my dogs get into a habit of like defaulting to go over to the bed, like I don't have a huge issue with that, right? When I'm out on walks, right, I primarily am working downstay. So if I come to a stop and my dogs start automatically going into a down, it's like, I don't really have a huge issue with that, you know what I mean?
Okay, so you're picking up on the 22nd around 9 a.m.?
Yeah.
Okay.
If our flight gets in on Monday.
Monday? Okay.
I mean, we're supposed to get like 5:45.
Okay. Yeah, if you wanted to come pick them up anytime before 8 o'clock, you could do that.
Okay. Yeah, I figured just to book the Tuesday just in case with like all the snow and things like that.
That's actually perfect. Did you want any grooming for him while he's here? Nails? Okay, yeah.
Do you guys do that?
Yeah, we do. We can do the full groom, the bath, ear cleaning, nail trim if you would like to do that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, of course. And then I saw in his bag just one scoop AM and PM.
Yeah, breakfast and dinner.
Perfect.
And you're late too.
Oh,
Yeah, no meds, nothing.
perfect. Just an easy boy, huh? All right, well, I can take him whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And you guys keep the leaf on?
Yeah, we can keep it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, you have a great night.
Thank you.
No
We appreciate you
problem.
guys so much.
Have a good one. All right, I'm gonna bring out to the back. Sunny, is it okay if I walk Palmer through there real quick? Yeah. Right. Palmer, come.
Very good. All right, so what I want you to do is you're gonna tell him come, slowly walk into there, and I want you to keep him with you.
And correct him if he's not.
Yeah, if he darts past you to the bed, you're gonna correct him. Once you get near the bed, you can get that command, but I want to see him stay with you a little better this time.
Prince, come.
There. Much better.
Prince, bed.
Excellent. Very good.
Where did Jada go? Excuse me?
forward. And we up there. Nice.
Press down.
I think he looks fantastic. I mean, you guys have done a really good job with him so far. I mean, it sounds like you guys haven't really had any issues with him or anything, and you can clearly tell you guys have been working with him, so that's great, obviously. So just keep it up, you know? Keep working with him, keep putting him through the motions with stuff, and, you know, you guys have quite a bit of follow-up support, so if you're running into any issues over the next year, I mean, you got classes you can come in for, so, you know, just kind of keep me posted on stuff.
Hi. How are you? Luca, how are you, my guy? How are you today? I know, thank you. How's he been?
Good.
And it's so cold out. David over there talking about Disney World. He's like standing in his Christmas lobby talking about Disney World. I think he's just living his best life. So with the come command, we're basically just transitioning from like the consistent pressure with it to the no and the tap at this point. So we'll give him the verbal cue, give him the opportunity to execute the command. If he either doesn't do it when we initially ask, or once he gets to us, he walks away before being released, we just mark with the no, do the tap, and then we repeat the command at that point. Luca, come. Good. Yeah, you remember now. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, actually, that didn't get on me. There, we lost it. We'll just have to make sure we don't slip on that spot on the floor. Okay. This is the most relaxed and like happy oh, did you see all of that? That he's ever been. Are we going together? Luca, come. Oh, good job. Look at you. You're nice. Okay. All right, now we're gonna turn the come into kind of like an off-leash walking type thing. So it's still the same command. It's the same criteria, so he's expected to stay in our bubble, except now we're gonna be mobile instead of stationary. So basically, I'm gonna recall him. As soon as he's in my bubble, I'll start moving, and he's expected to stay with me. I'll stop, he should settle in and stop with me, and then I'll release him from there. Luca, come. Boy, we'll move a little bit at first, then we'll stop. Oh, very nice. I know. He said, why did it take me this long to finally take a treat from this woman? Good job. Okay. We'll do that again. Come. Stay right with me. If I stop, you should stop. Perfect. Good boy. When we're doing the walking, it's not as strict as like when we're on leash where he has to be like on this side. He can kind of float around a little bit and that's fine, as long as he stays close. And here, release him from the sit and make sure that we're only doing the come right now. Because if you... So go back to him and just give him the okay. And the reason is because if the concept of being stationary away from you and coming to you are just so completely different that if you combine them a little bit too quickly before he's really competent in both of them separately, he can get easily really confused. Where he can be, what'll happen is it'll kind of degrade both commands because if we are recalling him out of his sits, eventually he's going to start anticipating the recall and just breaking his sit to come to you. And then if we start correcting him for that, he's going to be like, well, I thought the whole point of this was for me to come to you, and then he's going to stop wanting to come to us. So it can be kind of confusing from the beginning. We'll eventually get to the point where we are kind of doing everything all interchangeably, but this week when you practice with him, just try to avoid doing any recalls like out of a sit command or a bed command, just so that way it's easier for him. So even if like he is just following you around and he's really close to you, that's okay. Typically what that means is just where you're practicing is not as exciting as you are. You're kind of the most exciting thing in that environment. This is the perfect example of that. There's nothing really else going on. If you find that you want to work on more like distance recalls, just put like a long line on him and take him outside somewhere or somewhere that's more new to him. So that way when you tell him okay and release him, he actually wants to go away and explore because it's a new environment. And then you can practice those recalls more from a distance, if that makes sense.
Work on releasing him versus having him come.
Yes, yeah, so just release him from the sit, and then you're only gonna do the come command. You're not gonna do any other sits or anything like that. So right now he's in an okay, which is fine. So he can come see me if he wants to. That's totally allowed because he's released. So what you could do is you could walk away a little bit, and then once you get away from him, then just tell him come and call him to you.
But don't say.
You don't need to say the okay right now because he's already in it. So now you're just going to go from right now he has no criteria he's expected to fulfill, whereas as soon as you say COME, then he has criteria of going to you and staying in your bubble.
So basically you don't want to work on both of those in one session.
You don't want to work on the stationary commands and the recalls in the same session. Because, so like because the okay isn't a command, it's a release from a command. You know what I mean? So like when you're gonna call him right now, once he's called, he's then expected to maintain that recall until you give him the okay and release him. And then once he's released, then he can go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants and yada, yada, yada. But it's tempting where we want to tell him to like sit somewhere so that we can get further away to call him, and that's what we want to avoid right now.
So if I tell him like, and then he does.
Yes.
And I know you said you don't care if he sits or stands. So when I walk away.
Yes, technically then once you start moving, he's then expected to stay with you. And that's where if he doesn't, then we would just give him a correction for that.
So if I call him to come and he's standing with me and then I walk away, he should walk with me.
He should, technically, yeah.
I didn't tell him to sit.
Yeah, because you didn't tell him to sit, you didn't release him, so the last command you had given him, the criteria was stay in my bubble. So until he's told otherwise, he is expected to uphold that criteria that you've given him at that point. Of course, if devil's advocate, you call him, he comes over to you and you stand there for 10 minutes and we have a conversation and then you walk away, he might be like, wait a second, was I supposed to stay in my sit here? Was I supposed to go with you? And it could be a little bit confusing for him just from that gap of time. So in that situation, you could give him another come to remind him. That's not the end of the world. But if it's like you call him, he gets to you, and you start moving, yeah, he should just know to stay with you at that point. So don't move for this one. Just do a normal one where you stay put, call him, he comes to you, let him settle in, then release him, and we'll do a few of those.
Luca, come.
Very nice. He looked back at me like, gotta go. So here, yep. Perfect. Very good.
And you want me to release them?
Yes, you'll say okay, and then you can walk away.
Okay.
Perfect. And if he wants to stay in a sit, that's fine, because when you release him, the criteria we're releasing him from in this case is staying with you. So if he wants to stay in a sit, then that's his prerogative. The okay is in reference to, like, it can be used to release him from any command, whether that's the sit command, the bed command, when you're walking with him, when you recall him. Okay is just kind of your general overall, whatever I have previously told you to do, you don't have to do it anymore. So in the context of come, the specific criteria of come is just be close to me. So whether that's you're close to me and we're walking, or whether that's you're close to me and you're sitting or you're laying down, or even if you were standing right next to the bed and you told him come, if he got on the bed, he would still technically just be in a come, right? Because that's the only command we'd given him at that point. And so that criteria of stay in my bubble is what we need to be enforcing then at that point.
But if he like goes to the bed, like normally it's because you told him to go to the bed.
Sure.
And you say okay.
Yes.
But if you say come and he goes to the bed and then I start to walk, do I say okay?
You wouldn't say okay, because come is its own set of criteria. Okay, so like if I told him to come right now and then I start moving, the fact that I've told him come is the reason he's obligated to stay with me.
You say okay.
And then I say okay, and then we're done. And he's able to do whatever at that point. So just think of like every single command has its own criteria that you're enforcing. And then when you say okay, you're releasing them from upholding that criteria, basically. Does that make a little bit more sense? Okay, if it doesn't, tell me, and I can try to rephrase it.
Moving fast,
Yeah.
you forget.
Yes. Yeah, so like basically all we're doing right now, the only command is come. So even like right now, he is not in a sit or a down or anything, he's in come. So to be able to release him from that, you just say okay, basically. And then when you want to start moving again, you just tell him come and he's supposed to walk with you. It's basically the exact same thing as leash walking. There's just no leash now at this point.
No, come.
She's being tricky, Luca.
No.
He said, come on, man. I just want to lay down. Very nice.
Okay.
He said, thank goodness. But you see how he understands, you know? As soon as you said okay, he's like, cool. I can just stay here. I don't have to get up and follow you anymore. And that's exactly what we want. It's the command, think of the command as like the beginning of your string, and then the string stays there, and then once you say okay, you can cut the string and that's it, you know? So the beginning and the end of it. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Does it feel like it makes more sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
At first it was
Yeah. No, I get it. This can be confusing at first when you're getting used to it. All right, let's do, I don't think we'll do playtime with him today because one, we don't have as much time, and two, he looks utterly exhausted. So we'll wait and do that next time. What I'll have you work on this week is when you're practicing the come, even though you were practicing everything kind of all together and he was doing okay with it, try to just isolate the things for now. So like practice your sits and your beds together, and that's fine because those are both kind of in the same framework of like you stay somewhere away from me and you stay in one spot. And then with the come, try and keep those separate for now. And
So when we do our sit commands, once he gets the okay release, I should be close to him when I do that?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you should always go back to him just because that way he's not going to anticipate it and just start breaking the commands to get up whenever he feels like it. If he knows that like, I'm never allowed to leave this spot until my owner comes all the way back to me and tells me, they're just more content to wait there. And then,
He's been doing really good with this sit. Like,
yeah,
normally I'll take the dogs out separately because it's just easier because I don't want them doing any playtime. Like I want the business to big business. And
Yeah.
I play it at a different time.
Yep, that's good.
So since it's cold and it's so much, I've been trying to take them out separate. I have a gate. I put one over here, one over here. And then when they come in, when it's wet, I wipe all their paws. So I'll bring the puppy in first, and I'll make him sit at the bottom of the steps.
Yeah.
Normally, he would always come up the steps, put his nose up to the door,
Yeah.
face back and forth. He will sit the whole time that I clean Kobe's paws. I put Kobe inside, out of the sunroom. I open the door, he's still sitting, and I say, okay.
Oh my
And he
god.
does.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I'm like, okay, this is great.
Luca.
So instead of coming in at different times, that's
Yeah.
super recognizable.
Yeah, it's like you're finding ways to actually like apply it to like a real world situation that's actually useful.
Or they, like we have a projector upstairs. And
Yeah.
there's just stuff that they can knock into, so like I don't let them roughhouse upstairs because it's
Yeah.
a small area. And if they don't even do it anymore, but when they would start, I would say, no.
Yeah. And they would just stop.
And they would stop right away.
That's
And now they
great.
do it up there because it's like they're like, okay, this area is not for play.
I love it. Luca, you're a gentleman now.
So he gets the okay release. I should be close to him when I do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like took a step back from it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we would do the walking and it was fine.
Okay. So that first time on Tuesday, you went straight into the walking?
I did that on Monday too though.
Okay.
Maybe he was just having
Yeah.
an off day. Does
And
that
that's,
happen?
it can, yeah, for sure. And actually that's a really good example of like in the beginning stages when something is like pretty new to them, always start at like the easiest version of it
Okay.
to make sure like baseline, like, okay, that looks good, we're ready to move on to higher difficulty and then
Okay.
kind of work your way up.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a few reps, like you said, like you did like 5 of
Warm
them.
up
Essentially, yeah. Especially because he's young, you know, allow his brain to kind of like get in gear a little bit. And then you can kind of move difficulty level up from there. Kind of same like when we would do beds, like we started with a few reps of like staying next to him and releasing him. Then we'd walk a little bit, then we'd fully drop the leash and walk away. You know, we kind of worked up to it. You can kind of do the same thing with the come and then the follows and everything too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I was getting aggravated and he was picking up on that.
Yeah.
And that didn't help. So I was like, we're done
Yeah.
for the day. Like we're just
And that's better to do that. You know, if you find yourself getting frustrated, it's better to just like stop
Yeah.
and not do it because that's not.
I was like not having it. I was like exhausted. I was like, I'm over this. Like
Yeah.
I just want to go to bed.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, you know, I think that that's something good to keep in mind too, is like if you can tell that you yourself just don't have like the energy or the patience to do it, just like don't even do it at all. They're all puppies.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're all puppies. Yeah, the reason why we don't do any petting is just because we like to try to remove anything that can cause like competition with other dogs.
Gotcha.
So if a lot of times affection from humans, you know, once you start petting one dog, then they all want pet and it's a whole thing.
I'm surprised he's scared. Because Wyatt's 70 pounds.
Well, he's comfortable with Wyatt,
Yeah.
you know? These are completely new dogs that he's never really been around before. He's like a mixture of like a little nervous, but definitely excited.
He's like, this is so much fun. Oh my god. This is the best day of my life.
He's like, oh man, this is amazing. Oh, we got new snacks today. This is what I'm projecting into the universe, Rueger, that you're gonna do great. That's what I think is gonna happen. I'll take you, I'll take this. You guys are welcome to stand. If you want to sit on the crates too, that's fine. Whatever's easiest or you prefer. I know. I know. Good job. Good job. Very nice. I know. Good job. So how many sessions of this have we done with him?
5.
I was gonna say this is the 5th one.
5, I think. Feel a little crunchier, huh?
We did have a breakthrough last session. Wow. Look at that young man. We started this with him screaming like he was like a gutted pig the whole time. And now look at you. A much more reasonable fellow. Wow. Good boy. I'm so proud of you, buddy. You're being very brave. You're being very brave. Can you believe you made such a big deal out of this?
I can't believe how bad it was last week.
And how good it is this week?
This week.
My gosh, what a sweet boy. I know, you did amazing. You did amazing. I'm so proud of you. You want more snacks?
Hey, I'm proud of you, buddy.
He said, guys, did you see me?
He is extremely OLR, not aggressive. It's just pure frustration. I used to work for a really big rescue, a non-profit animal shelter here in Austin, and that's where I adopted him from.
Okay.
Came to us probably when you're 2 years old. I based off of all his kind of personality traits, I would say he was a stray for most of his life.
Yep.
A lot of the things that he exhibited showed that he never was socialized, kind of like had this need to eat everything in sight. I have another dog, so he never resource guard in an aggressive way, but he would try and take her food, or if he was eating, he would look at her and like stare her down, and then she was like, wow, you're freaking me out, and she would stop eating. They don't do that he doesn't do that anymore, that we're completely past that stage. There are no issues there. It's really just his reactivity. Okay. A couple months ago, or not a couple, but probably 6 or so months ago, I think at this point, maybe, I ended up going with a trainer who did e-collar training, or like, I don't know if he called himself balanced, but his main e-collar training. And it was my first time doing that with a dog in general. I'm not against it. I do a lot of research to make sure people are using it the right way, and I want to make sure that I'm using it the right way. And paid a lot of money to use this person, which I know that a lot of people end up telling you when they do training, they probably pay a ton of money. And I don't like board and train for the sake of, I am just a dog owner who wants to be present every time, because I want to learn as well. I know it's more so me learning versus my dog learning at the same time.
Yeah.
His reactivity, when we did the training with the e-collar, he did well with all the basic stuff in the beginning. And then when we were put in real life scenarios, that's when the trainer really didn't know what to do. He was like, yeah, we can desensitize him and work in this way, and this is what we're looking for. But I didn't realize till it was too late to be like, oh, I should have backed out when I could have, because he didn't have the facility, or the means, not facility, but the means to socialize him correctly, to get him used to how he should be acting as a dog who can socialize and say hi like a normal dog.
Yeah.
His reactivity is his threshold changes sometimes, and it has no specific characteristic to what a dog looks like, I would say, or even their gender, whether they're neutered or unneutered, none of that. It's just when he feels like it. Sometimes it can be 10 feet in front of him, other times it can be, 50 feet out. It's what he feels like at times. He snaps, he lunges, he snarls, he barks, he growls, all the type of things. Never redirected on anyone, not me. He only has redirected on a leash before, but more so out of frustration, like excessive chewing. He grabs a leash, starts chewing on it and whining.
Yeah.
I've tried 2 forms of training with him. It was the e-collar, and also before that, it was more so trying to work on desensitizing him at a distance. And that was helpful in the beginning when I first got him, because one, he was coming out of a shelter, he was pretty shut down for the most part, and then the longer he was with me, the braver and the more he was like, oh, I'm staying here, I'm getting better, let me be more bold. I don't think he's a dog that can be stationary when working in the beginning. I think a lot of people were like, in the beginning before the e-collar, they were like, oh, let's like positive reinforcement, treats, get him to sit. And I'm like, I don't think he's a dog that can sit when we're trying to get him to do this. I think we need to give him a job to do in the beginning to desensitize him and understand there are other things that I can be doing right now or focusing on, because sitting is really hard. Sometimes I think he's got a little bit of like ADHD. He's hyper alert, and when I first got him, he was very hyper alert at night. So if we were walking at night, he was always ears back, like eyes shooting everywhere, even if there was like nothing going on. Always looking, and then the moment like a sound happened, he'd like dart and look that way and be like, I need to be on alert. He's a bit better now. I haven't walked him since we moved. So I moved from an apartment complex to now a house that has like a really big yard. So I don't walk him in my neighborhood yet until so that I can do it the right way, because we have dogs walking out here and stuff like that. So I just want to make sure that I'm revisiting the e-collar. I still use it, but for very general things like practicing come when called and place command. I think my biggest issue is how do I make myself successful and my dogs training when I don't have a place to safely socialize and work through those issues?
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand. So there's 2 sides of the equation when we're working with leash reactivity, right? So we have the training side of things, which is the, can your dog walk nicely around other dogs? Can they hold position around other dogs? Can they basically just like keep their shit together, right? And then you have the socialization side of things, which is does the dog actually know how to interact with other dogs? Now, obviously, in a good training program, we're going to address both of those things because, obviously, if the dog is being reactive towards other dogs, obviously it's partially an impulse control related issue, but it's partially those dogs are just so novel. You know what I mean? Like he's not getting enough interaction outside of those training sessions with other dogs where it's just kind of like you're fighting an uphill battle. Now, there are plenty of clients that I work with that just do not have access to socializing their dog with other dogs. And we have to just go about the approach of just, hey, you just can't react to other dogs, right? And you could definitely get the job done, but it is nice to be able to find somewhere that you could socialize the dog. Now, you have another dog, you said. Obviously, they get along fine. Does he have any other, like, quote unquote, like dog friends that you socialize him with?
So he has dog friends, and I've slowly, with like some of our friends who've moved here or people that I've met, he does get along with dogs. And like I also tell people when they're like, oh my god, I'd love to introduce my dog to your dogs, and I'm like, okay, but like tell me a little bit about your dog, because my dog's a little crazy, so I need to make sure that like nothing's gonna happen.
So the 3 dogs that you've introduced him to outside of your dog, how did you go about introducing? Like, what was like, if you had to detail the exact process of how you did it, how did you do it?
When it was here at home, what I did is, for one, we have like a glass sliding door that looks out to the yard, and then also just a regular door that exits to the yard. So The first one, I had him out in the yard, and there's a corner where you can't see the glass door. So I had him sitting, paying attention to me, basically doing some like scent desensitization to get his brain focusing on something else. And then the dog came out, he saw the dog, and he was fine. He whined a little bit. I was rewarding that. And basically, he was kind of like, okay. And the dog was okay. And I said, okay, let's see. And I didn't want either of us holding the leashes because of tension or whatever. And I just dropped the leash and I released him. And the moment I released him, he charged the dog. But he basically is barking at the dog and just like yapping at them in
He didn't do anything. Like he charged,
didn't
just kind of barked at him.
He just charged, and the moment he got up to the dog, he was just barking at them, like yelling at them, basically.
Yeah. We see that way more often than you'd think.
Yeah, and he's just
Even
like
with really social dogs.
yeah, and he's circling the dog, like barking, and then I was like correcting him, and after a couple, like 2 corrections, he was fine. I like even verbally, I was like out, you know, and he would just walk away and avoid the dog until they finally like were fine. Second dog, I did it opposite. I had the visiting dog outside, but at the end of our yard where he could see through the glass door. And he did really well, was whining, looking at me, basically saying like, oh my God, there's a dog there. Are we going to meet the dog? When I walked out, I just walked a bit closer to the dog. He didn't like pull me or anything. He was perfectly fine. There was no tension.
Yep.
And then I released him again, and he just, I wouldn't say he I can't remember if he charged the dog, but he definitely was walking quite quickly. I don't know if he was like running per se. And there was like just a lot of barking back and forth because this dog had a crazy amount of energy. It's just like she can clear a 6-foot fence. So she was just running all over the place. So definitely the energy of the dog determines how he reacts as well. Sometimes the more I introduce him to dogs, if he has, I have attempted to introduce him to one of my friend's dog who also has a lot of reactivity. It's 25-pound Chihuahua, but they basically match each other's reactivity, and we couldn't successfully get them to meet because they like if a dog doesn't shut up, Baker's not shutting up. And
so what you're saying is basically you both were like just hanging out with the dogs on leash. They were just yapping, and you just didn't feel comfortable just letting them loose.
We did let them loose. It just wasn't successful. So what we did was we did a tandem walk, and they did really well. After they calmed down, we probably did like a 10 to 15 minute tandem walk parallel on opposite sides of the street. They calmed down, they did fine, started ignoring each other, and then she has like a regular fence, and we did the introduction at the fence. They sniffed each other a little bit, and I forgot who barked first, and then it was like unleashing, and I was like, you know what, let's just try getting them to look at each other in the yard. So we're having them sit, they're doing perfectly fine, but then they're also barking each other. And I was like, okay, well, let's just see what happens. And so we let the leash down, and Baker tried to charge the Chihuahua, and the Chihuahua definitely was much quicker than him. They like chased each other around the yard. We're trying to step on the leashes to grab them, and the Chihuahua pinned him and bit his butt and like yanked fur out. He probably had a couple of bites, but yeah, Baker just ran away from the Chihuahua. So
yeah. Okay, I got you. Now you kind of just, you know, as you were talking about that, you mentioned, you know, you charged the other dog, right? You know, you went quickly at the other dog, stuff like that. When you see those types of behavior, like does that get you really on edge? Like, does that make you nervous?
Not really, because I'm very picky about the dogs that I'm considering introducing him to. The thing that makes me more nervous is like, and I'm not really nervous about it because the people who are letting them introduce are my friends and people I know. So I tell them ahead of time, I'm like, don't freak out. It always looks scarier than what it really is. Yes. So I need you to be calm, and I just need you to do these things if this happens. Yeah. But I'm never really nervous about it because I don't want to, I'm very, very picky, like I said, because I don't want to then put him in a scenario that creates a negative association to something that creates like 10 steps back. So I'm never nervous. I've seen god awful dog. I was in the dog program, so I've seen terrible dog fights in the shelter.
Once you've seen one or two of them, it kind of calluses you up to it a little bit. So
exactly. So it's just like I already know what to do. I'm fine. There's like, you know, so
Okay, cool. All right. So as far as the socialization side of things is concerned, just as you're describing all of this to me, it sounds like you're taking so many steps like in this big circle to get to this point that we can just go straight to. And let me explain what I mean by that, right? So obviously when he was in the shelter, you mentioned he was in all the play groups, right? He was super social, very, very friendly, right? As you brought him home, obviously, initially you introduced him to the one dog. It went pretty well, obviously. He started getting a little bit more confident at home. You probably started seeing the leash reactivity start coming out of him a little bit more, stuff like that. And as that happened, right, it sounds like when you went to go introduce him to these other dogs, again, whether consciously or not, because of that reactivity you're used to seeing, it puts you in a position where you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to take all these precautions and try to get him to chill out and, do walks and put him in a sit and just do all of these different things to try to get him to chill before we introduce him to the other dog, which winds up inadvertently just creating so much more frustration because all he wants is to go meet that dog in that moment. And all we're doing is telling him, well, first you have to do this, then 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 you have to do this, which could actually amplify that behavior like tenfold, right? So, and even the situation you described that you said didn't go well, quote unquote, right? The situation with the small reactive dog, like that very well may have been a situation that probably had we not intervened when they kind of quote unquote charged at him and started chasing each other around and stuff like that would have went perfectly fine. But because we didn't know what was going to happen in that moment when they were kind of charging at each other with all that intensity, and we immediately went to, we got to go grab them and try to step on the leashes and create all this extra human frustration kind of in the mix of things. That's where you'll see that kind of tip over the end and go from just, this is really, really intense play to it could turn into a little bit of a squabble or something. You know what I mean?
Does that apply if we know like that the Chihuahua has history attacking other dogs?
Listen, I mean, you're 100% correct on knowing and trusting the dogs you're socializing with. Now, I didn't know if the dog has a history of actually attacking other dogs. I'm not saying attacking from the standpoint of like he's just reactive and loud and barks in their faces and like jumps on them and stuff like that. But if he's actually attacking other dogs, that would not be a dog I would have even tried to socialize him with. You know what I mean?
I don't think he actively seeks out dogs, but he's definitely a dog who overcorrects, I would say.
Sure. And what do you mean by that? Just a lot of attitude and stuff like that? Or
I mean, when he corrects, he thinks that he needs to bite the dog.
And when he bites the dog, forget your dog, right? When he bites the other dog, when we say that, is he actually injuring the other dogs, like breaking skin, drawing blood, things like that? Or is it literally just like his way of correcting is what a lot of little dogs will do, which is they'll let this huge bark out and jump at them with their mouth and just like hit them with their mouth, basically.
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it just depends on the second dog. Obviously if the dog like lets him get them, he'll probably, because like he did puncture, it wasn't deep, it was breaking skin and he had like a couple of scabs, but nothing like that was concerning. But yeah, I mean, he's known for being a bit too much, this dog.
Sure. Well, regardless, right? So this dog in particular, I would probably say then is just not we don't know and trust that dog enough, right? So that would just not be a dog that I would socialize him with. But any of these other dogs, if I know that they're social, right? And I know that they're not going after other dogs, they're not biting other dogs, getting into dog fights all the time and stuff like that. A lot of times we just have to go for it. And I think this is where we get the breakthrough a lot of times, at least in our training kennel with socialization, is when we go to do that socialization for the very first time with dogs, there's not a whole lot of thought that goes into it as far as, we have to do all of these different things. Again, if I think the dog is actually going to attack another dog, I'll put in place a safety protocol like a muzzle or something like that. But that doesn't sound like your dog, right? If somebody comes in and tells me, hey, I have a dog that previously used to be a social butterfly basically and gets very, very frustrated and reactive on a leash, I separate those things completely in my head, right? On the walk, we got to address that stuff. We want to be concerned about those things and stuff like that. But when it comes to actual socialization where we're going to be letting the dogs off leash to go run and play with each other, like I want them to just get it out of their system. And I think shelters do a good job of this to a fault sometimes, where it's like when they're assessing dogs, in a lot of cases, at least the ones around here, they're kind of just throwing the dogs together. It's like, get in there and let's figure out how you do with other dogs kind of thing. And that's where, like you were saying, like sometimes you'll see big fights break out because you don't know the history of the dogs. But in other cases, you see that these dogs do perfectly fine, right? And that's why they were probably able to socialize him so well, is because it kind of was just of that mentality of we're just putting him in, right? We're getting him in that group and we're seeing how he does. And he flourished in that environment. And I think he's not seeing that you're, trusting him enough to just get that out of his system, which is why you're in this cycle of like, we're trying to socialize him and you've done it a couple of times successfully, obviously, but still with this mentality of like, I don't really know what you're going to do yet. And I don't fully trust you yet. So it's like, this back and forth, where if you know and trust that other dog, how I personally would go into this kind of situation is I would go into an open area with the dogs, have them on leash for a second, gain control of them for a split second, right? You put them in a sit for half a second. You can make sure the other person has just the dog on a leash, right? And then you just drop leashes and you truly step back and just see what happens, right? And the thing you have to do in that moment is you have to go into it expecting that the first handful of times that you're going to go and do that, it's going to be really chaotic initially, right? Because he's so pent up with this, right? He doesn't get to socialize very much. And a lot of these dogs that are, maybe a little bit under socialized and reactive, the first couple of times we go to socialize them, it's like they finally get to let loose and they just let loose with so much intensity, right? And it could look really scary initially. And I always tell everybody, like, before you intervene or try to correct for something or anything like that, just like, take a big breath and step back for a couple of seconds and really look at, is something actually happening or not right now? Because 9 out of 10 times it's not, right? And again, I really, from everything that you're telling me right now, I don't think, socialization, as far as that's concerned, is going to be much of an issue, as long as you kind of start trusting him a little bit more and start just putting him into those situations without a lot of the kind of fluff that you're putting in so far. One big thing that I would like to see you be able to do in the next, we'll say 7 to 10 days, is to be able to get him around another dog. It can be one of the ones he already knows, aside from his best buddy. I don't care about that one. It sounds like he's totally fine with that dog, right? But I would like to get him around a dog that he is not around very often. Maybe he's only socialized with 1 or 2 times before, or one that's totally new. And what I would really like is for you to be able to get a video of it and send it to me. And I want to see the process where you just let him go socialize, right? You get into your area, each one of you has a leash, 2 seconds, then take the leashes off, let him go, or drop the leashes and let him go, right? I really want to see what that looks like. And that's going to be able to at least give me a little bit more insight as far as if there's anything else that needs to be done as far as that's concerned. But most times, again, with dogs like him, really it's just a matter of you just got to start socializing him a little bit, right? And giving him a somewhat regular social outlet with new dogs. And that could even be like once a month or once every other month or so he meets a new dog. But you do want to figure out a way to be able to get him around some other dogs. So that's going to be one thing I have you do. But as far as the socialization stuff, that doesn't sound like it's a big priority right now. So definitely try to get a video of that in the next 7 to 10 days so I could take a look at it and give you my opinions on that.
When do we want to, if we have to at all, interrupt the introduction? Sure.
Yeah, no, good question. So I always try to go into socialization with some sort of fail safe where it's like, if things were to go wrong, this is how I'm going to handle that situation. For me, it's always been the e-collar for that, right? So when I go into social situations, again, no matter what dog it is I'm working with, if I have a dog that I deem as like a supervised dog, so they're not maybe a social butterfly, or I'm unsure what they're going to do in a situation, they have an e-collar on and I just have it default set all the way up, not with the expectation that I'm going to need to use it, but it's like the emergency brake then at that point, right? So if, like, let's say like shit hit the fan and suddenly he's trying to go after the other dog, I have at least one fail safe. If I hit that button, I at least have the highest probability that I'm able to interrupt that. It may actually work in that moment. It may not, right? Obviously, we've seen him in the past blow through 100 before, so we don't know if it exactly would. At that point, your second fail safe is just your leash, right? So you would go in and grab that leash and remove him from the situation then at that point.
But if they're just like being really rowdy and vocal, is my hope to just like let them get it out and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, every dog has their own individual play style. Like if you were to see my dogs playing with each other, it looks like a dog fight is happening. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like that. I think a lot of times, again, we get kind of scared off by the noises and the looks and the teeth and all that kind of stuff. Where like that's just kind of what they do sometimes, and it could get very, very rough. You know.
Is the beginning more so because what I'm hoping is like I know that dogs for the most part would change their play style depending on the other dog, or you're hoping for a dog to do that. Some of them
Sure.
don't do that, right? This point of socialization is just letting him get it out and that's it. It's not really.
Yeah, and keep in mind they don't change their play style necessarily. What happens is they learn how to read cues from the other dog better, right? So a dog that plays really rough, generally speaking, is going to play rough. But if they're playing with a dog that they're perceiving is like, you know, not into what they're doing or giving clear cues of like trying to get them to go away or snapping and constantly leaving, and it's not like reciprocated very much, we want our dog to be respectful of that and take it down a couple of notches, right? So some dogs like inherently just know how to do that. Others, we have to teach them how to do that, right? So the most common place we'll see that we need to go in and really teach that is when we have like a really young rambunctious puppy and a client that has maybe like an older, like 12-year-old crotchety dog that's just doesn't want anything to do with it. And the puppy goes over and just wants his dog to play so bad and is barking and getting in their face and pawing at them and this and that. And the dog is snap, 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 snap. And the puppy's not doing anything. And that's where if I notice that and I notice it's repeatedly happening and the puppy's not backing off, I will actually step in and give a correction in that moment. So I'm not going to tell him out or I'm not going to tell him leave it or anything like that, like we just decided. I'm actually going to correct for that because that's something I don't want them to ever do. I don't want them to ever continue pushing when a dog is giving clear signs they don't want anything to do with them. But that gets back to, again, knowing the dogs that you're socializing him with. Right now, we should be socializing him with relatively playful dogs, right? Or relatively social dogs that are going to be able to reciprocate that with him.
He's kind of a demanding dog, though. Like, if a dog doesn't play with him, I haven't seen him do it in a while because obviously he hasn't been around these other dogs that he used to do this with. But even with, you know, our first dog, he like will paw and be like, I want you to pay attention to me. And sometimes they'll just walk away.
Yeah. And again, you know, I live by the philosophy of like, I want to intervene as little as possible in socialization because I want these dogs to figure out how to communicate effectively with each other, right? I'm there to play lifeguard and I'm there to make sure, like, again, if shit hits the fan that I can step in and intervene, or if it's hitting a point where it's truly too much, right? He's doing it so much, the dog is constantly trying to get away from him and he's just pursuing. Again, I would step in and give a correction. But again, some dogs are pushy, right? Some dogs are really confident and really dominant like that. And that's just what they do. And frankly, from the opposite side of things, I've had some dogs that are really confident and pushy like that and kind of do the paw and all that be very, very beneficial in helping more shy dogs come out of their shell a little bit, you know? So it's not an inherently bad thing necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. I work in my office. Cool. All right. Well, this was great. I was excited. Thank you for all your information.
Yeah, happy to help. We'll get this under control. Like I said, it's going to take just a little bit of fine tuning with things. A lot of times with reactivity, what I find with the clients is it really is just troubleshooting. You know, there's so many different philosophies and ideas behind it. And I think sometimes we can make it a little too complicated. So I like to just take it like one thing at a time, you know, and that's where most of the first session is me just getting the information that I need. So I have a good understanding of like all of the areas of the dog's life. From there, again, one thing at a time. Like if I don't want to overwhelm you with like, do this on the walk, then do this here, then do this here, then do this here. It's like one thing, like the reacting in the house. Like there's no reason why he should still be reacting in the house, right? Yeah. That's something we can get under control right away and just count that as a win, right? And that's going to directly correlate to the next thing we have to work on then.